Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. And I stand here with my academic hat, although it's also true that I'm leading the team that is evaluating ISA², doing the interim evaluation of ISA². So I feel like in a familiar situation, because as an academic, I typically stand in front of students that I will have to evaluate. And here there's a lot of people that run programs that are within the ISA² hat. I actually have to evaluate you too, but don't worry. I mean, it's all for good. The issue there is whether the ISA² promise is something that can be achieved within something else, some other ingredients within the policy layer, as Karsten was mentioning before, within some complementary action that makes our rules and our practices, our administrative procedures compatible between themselves even before they are interoperable in an informatic sense, if you wish, in a digital sense. It's easy for people to say, maybe in a Europe in which governments often don't talk to each other, in a European Union in which sometimes you organize a conference and people from different DGs meet at the conference for the first time, and in a European Union in which most of the processes are now subject to agencification, so it's much more difficult to have compatible procedures, you can achieve this through code. In other words, can code save us? Can code save Europe where law has failed or where politics has failed? And this, I think, is the promise and a little bit the challenge of ISA², and I already anticipate my conclusion. My conclusion is that without this complementary actions, without the policy layer that Karsten was mentioning before, without walking the talk, as Sophia was saying before, I think it's going to be very difficult to realize this phenomenal promise. And I think the foregone opportunity, what we call the opportunity cost of not speedily deploying ISA² in all its full potential, is even greater now that we are approaching an era in which regulators find it inevitable to consider data-driven solutions when they shape policy. So it's not just a matter of data exchanges anymore. It's a matter of designing and devising, implementing, and monitoring the compliance with policies that we enact at the EU level. So how do we do this? Well, one of the things that I gathered this morning was that I agree very much with as well, was some of our colleagues that were saying sometimes it's easier to share information across layers in the multi-level governance or across countries rather than with your neighbor next door. And similarly, Lefteris, I think, was saying something about we should be moving to, and that's my interpretation, what we would call a spaghetti model into a lasagna model, if you wish. We're far away from lunch, so I can use that. Meaning we should actually reduce transaction costs by having single points of contact also in the multi-level governance of the EU and across administration, rather than having the spaghetti bowl problem of having to reach out to individual administrations with each one with an own standard and trying to build a dialogue in a one-to-one basis. Now, I have done my exercise in the past because the European Parliament has asked the European Commission and many other EU institutions to adopt common administrative procedures on the legal side, administrative law. And so I skipped this slide because I think it's better to look at this directly. And whether to adopt common procedures so that citizens and businesses that interact with administrations at the EU level would find a similar environment every time they interact. So if this were true, in this slide, in this radar slide, you would have the whole area green. As you see, we're very far away from this. And even if you count as administrations that implicitly adopt a piece of soft law that was created by the European Ombudsman already 10 years ago, you don't go beyond the more lightly shaded area there. So walking the talk is there. We need to have also in the EU lasagna some consistency, and also at the member state situation consistencies within member states before we can really realize this full potential. Now, as I was saying, the opportunity cost increases because if you look at what happens, and these are the building blocks that would realize, of course, this potential, but you all know this. This is what I told the European Parliament. This is a study that was published earlier this year in response to a call from the European Parliament. And we wanted to look at the legal problem. Should we achieve a consistent European Union administrative law? And my answer was technical and legal. I was saying, Not only we need it on the legal side to strengthen trust with citizens, but also we need it because if we don't do it, we will never be able to realize the full potential of the building blocks across administrations, because the subject matter is different. Now, if you look at the role played by policymakers today, the opportunity cost becomes even bigger, because the handbook of the regulators today doesn't have the same words than when we went through universities and were studying public policy. The words that we use are, including interoperability, of course, but they are things like openness and neutrality, scalability, contestability. Regulators today don't just have the problem of where do they get the data, they have the problem sometimes of creating data spaces, creating open sharing solutions. And they have an additional opportunity today. Not only they have a multitude of potential data sources, but they also have the possibility of experimenting with data before they decide to scale up regulatory solutions. Here I just show some of the things that we're doing today in regulation that require data awareness and interoperability. Just imagine, just to give one quick example, experimentations on self-driving cars where you actually need to monitor in real time from the corridors across countries, so data coming from different countries and different administrations, whether the level of safety and security and user protection that you were imagining are actually true in reality. You need to mobilize this information together. You need to do cross-data analysis. You need to put them together. You need to have multiple information sources, but also create a data space for experimentation. So where ISA² could make the difference if the rest of the EU does its homework? Well, the seamless interoperability in EU's multi-level governance. What we would like to see at the political level, at least we would see on the technical level, but we need to have common intent and similarly, say, consistent rules. Of course, we can cut red tape down to zero if we want. We've had programs such as administrative burden reduction programs so far. But if compliance can be the result of automatic data sharing, and you need a lot of trust for that, then red tape goes to zero. On blockchain and EID, I think they're useful complements to ISA², and together they are a very powerful tool to achieve solutions in the future. I would really congratulate the Commission on what it is trying to do, and we are waiting for the political feedback. And last but not least, as my time is up, I think we need to explore future possibilities in RegTech and SubTech. We need to explore possibility in empowering industrial data spaces. And most importantly, we have to bring current policymakers into the world of experimental policy making through things such as virtual sandboxes, randomized control trials, and others. You only make it possible if you put together the legal side, the political side, and the technical side. Otherwise, ISA² will let us just drown in a sea of code. Thank you.